The wind screamed across the Sawtooth Ridge as if 1,000 ghosts were begging to be let into the world. At 9,000 feet, the air was thin, sharp, and cruel. Even in late May, pieces of snow hid in the shadows of the lodgepole pines, refusing to melt. In the middle of the frozen rush of Painted Creek stood Silas Blackwood, a man carved from the same hard stone as the mountains around him. He worked a beaver trap with numb hands. The water was so cold it cut like a knife. But Silas forced himself not to feel it. He was 40, though the war had carved lines in his face that made him look older. A jagged white scar ran from his temple down into his beard, a reminder of the day a Confederate saber almost ended him. He hauled the trap and animal from the creek, the muscles in his shoulders aching. Silas was a big man, broad in the chest, strong from years of dragging timber, hauling elk, and surviving winters that killed other men. His movements were quiet. They learned from years of hunting animals and being hunted by memories. His cabin sat hidden on a rocky shelf a mile up the slope, a low log structure built for survival, not comfort. Thick logs, narrow paper-covered windows, a stone chimney that smoked every hour of every day. Inside it smelled of smoke, furs, and the lonely life of a man who expected nothing good from the world. Every night Silas fought the same ghosts, the smoke over Maryland cornfields, the scream of a dying horse, the weight of his younger brother Thomas dying in his arms, and the memory of Mary, the woman back in Ohio who decided she could not marry a man half ghost already. Silas told himself love was a weakness. Out here, distraction meant death. A slip of the axe, a missed step on ice, a bad storm. But the winters were getting harder. Age was creeping into his bones. One bad fall, one broken leg, and he would freeze before morning. He needed help. He needed a partner. Not romance, not tenderness. Just another pair of hands to keep him alive. That was when he opened the wooden chest at the foot of his bed. Inside were letters, dozens of them, from the mail order agency in St. Louis. Many were filled with sweet words about romance and God's will. Silas threw those aside. He stopped at one written in hard, sharp handwriting. My name is Ara Vance. I am 28. I can cook. I can sew. I do not fear work. I ask for no love, only safety, respect, and a roof that does not leak. Silas read it twice. It held no lies, no softness, only truth. He paid for her stagecoach fare and a wedding ring. Then he wrote back, Come to Pine Hollow. I offer hard living, protection, and food. S. Blackwood. 2,000 miles away in Chicago, Ara Vance sat in a crowded station holding that letter so tightly it crushed in her hand. Coal smoke filled the air. People pushed past her, but she barely noticed her surroundings. Her face in the window looked pale and haunted. That she had once been proud, an independent seamstress. But that was before Mr. Sterling, before the lies he told when she fought him off, before the police believed him instead of her. In the city, a rich man's lie was worth more than a poor woman's truth. She had lost her job, her reputation, her room, her safety. The West was not a dream. It was the last place left where she might breathe again. The stagecoach ride across the plains broke her down even more. Dust filled her lungs. Strangers whispered about mail-order brides. A storm wrecked the coach, and Ara tore her petticoat to save a dying driver, fighting through fear and freezing rain. But she survived. Step after step, she kept going. 3 days later, Silas Blackwood rode into Pine Hollow wearing his best buckskins. Men stared. Women whispered. The miners laughed at the scar on his face and muttered about the poor girl who would marry him. Silas ignored them. He waited at the depot for 2 days. And then the battered stage rolled in. Ara stepped down, holding her carpetbag like a shield. Dust covered her dress. Her bonnet sagged. Her hands trembled. But her eyes, those frightened, stubborn eyes, met his. A long moment passed. Silas saw a woman who had walked through fire. Ara saw a dangerous man who wasn't looking at her like she was something to take. Silas stepped forward. "You Ara?" he said. "I am," she answered softly. "Are you Mr. Blackwood?" "Sill," he corrected. Well, he wiped his hand on his trousers and offered it. His hand was huge and scarred. Hers was small and cold. She placed her palm in his. "Wagons this way," he said. And without another word, their hard new life began. Silas led Ara into the general store, the wooden floor creaking under their steps. The air smelled of flour dust and coffee beans. Henderson, the storekeeper, glanced up and smirked the moment he saw them. "Well now, Silas," he said loudly. "Well, it looks like your package finally arrived." Ara stiffened. The words stung, sharp as a slap. Silas ignored him and placed his list on the counter. Flour, beans, coffee, salt, sugar, pork, and a box of .44 cartridges. Henderson chuckled and leaned over the counter to look at Ara. His eyes crawled over her in a way that made her want to shrink into the floor. "Bit scrawny for a mountain wife," Henderson sneered. "Hope she came with a return policy. These mail-order brides are usually damaged goods." Ara's heart dropped. She waited for Silas to laugh at her, to agree, to call her a burden. Men always did. But the store went silent. Silas turned toward Henderson in slow, quiet anger. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't touch his gun. He simply leaned forward, placing both large hands on the counter until the boards creaked under the pressure. "Pack the flour," Silas said, voice low enough to shake the air. "And while you do it, now keep a civil tongue in your head. You speak of this lady with respect, or I will tear this counter down and close your shop myself." Henderson went pale. I was just joking, Silas. No offense meant." "Pack," Silas repeated. Ara stared at Silas with wide eyes. No man had ever defended her. Never once. Not when the world lied about her. Not when she cried alone. But this mountain man, this stranger, stood between her and humiliation without hesitation. "Are you all right?" Silas asked when they stepped outside. "Yes," she whispered. "Thank you." "Don't thank me," he muttered. "I don't pay for insults." They rode out of town, silence settling around them. The road turned to a narrow trail that climbed toward the mountains. Ara gripped the saddle horn tightly. She had never ridden a horse. The cliff beside them dropped hundreds of feet. Her heart pounded. "Don't look down," Silas called. "Look at the horse's ears. Well, he knows the way." Hours passed. The air grew colder. The mountains rose like jagged teeth around them. By sundown, the temperature had dropped sharply. "We camp here," Silas said. Ara tried to help gather wood, but her numb fingers kept dropping everything. Silas noticed. "Sit," he said, guiding her to a log by the fire. "Thaw out." He handed her his only heavy wool blanket. "But what about you?" she asked, shivering. "I've slept in snowdrifts," he said. Take it." The blanket smelled like smoke and pine. Warmth washed over her slowly. Across the fire, Silas cleaned his rifle. Ara watched him silently. Big, scarred, wild. Yet he sat far from her, his body tense, giving her space. When the wind crashed against the cabin-like trees, Ara flinched. Silas set the rifle down. "You sleep," he said. "I'll keep the fire up tonight." You're not coming to sleep?" she whispered. He shook his head. "I needed a partner, not a woman to harm. You take the blanket. I'll stay here." Ara watched him sit rigid and cold, staring into the flames to make sure she felt safe. And slowly, for the first time in years, she drifted into sleep without fear. The next morning, they reached the ridge. Silas helped her down at the cabin. Small, rough, lonely, pressed against a granite outcrop. Smoke rose from the chimney. The world around them was silent, hard, and beautiful. "It's not much," Silas said quietly. "It will do," Ara said, even though something inside her sank. Inside, the cabin was cold and dim. One bed, one table, one shelf of traps and tools. A place built for survival, not comfort, not warmth. "I'll sleep on the floor," Silas said suddenly. Ara stared at the narrow bed. You are the husband. The bed belongs to you. You traveled 2,000 miles. You sleep on the bed," he said firmly. "End of it." The air tightened between them. Two strangers standing in a 12-foot room, bound by marriage, but unsure of each other's souls. "We should set terms," Silas said. Ara braced herself. Terms with men had always been threats. Silas crossed his arms, his voice steady. "I am a hard man. I do not have soft words, but I will never lay a hand on you in anger. I will not starve you. I will provide food and wood, and I expect you to do your part. Cook, mend, keep the home, and I expect you to stay." Ara met his eyes. "I have nowhere to run. I will do my share." "Good," he said softly. "Then we're agreed." Days passed, hard days. Ara's lungs burned with every climb. Her hands blistered. She burned bread. She froze hanging laundry. She cried quietly at night, where he couldn't hear. One afternoon, as Silas returned early and found her fighting to split wood, the axe bounced. She gasped in frustration. "You're fighting the wood," Silas said behind her. She jumped. "I can do it." "You're holding too tight," he said, stepping behind her. He didn't take the axe. He guided her hands with his own. His chest pressed warm against her back. His chin almost touched her hair. Suddenly, the world shrank to the sound of their breathing. "Let the axe do the work," he murmured. They swung together. Let the wood split clean. For one long moment, Silas stayed close, both of them frozen in a warmth neither expected. Then he stepped back quickly, flushed. I've got traps to oil," he muttered, leaving fast. Ara stood trembling. Her hand still tingled where his had been. 2 weeks later, a storm hit. The wind howled through the cracks. The cold cut like knives. Ara shivered violently under the blankets. Silas watched her suffer. He looked at the drafty floor. He made a choice. "We share the bed," he said, "for warmth." Fear flickered in her eyes. "Just sleep," he promised. "I will not cross your side." They lay back to back, inches apart. The storm slammed the shutters. Ara gasped and flinched. Without thinking, Silas reached back. His hand found hers under the covers. Gentle, steady. "It's just wind," he whispered. "It can't get in." Ara didn't pull away. For the first time in years, she slept feeling protected. The next day, they went to town for supplies. Insults flew. Whispers followed them. A woman grabbed her child and pulled her away from Ara. "She's a soiled woman," the woman hissed. A miner muttered, "Mountain man's whore." Silas moved like a storm breaking loose. He stood over the miner. "Say it again," Silas growled, "and you'll be eating through a straw." The street fell silent. Ara looked at Silas with stunned eyes. No one had ever stood for her like this back at the cabin that night. Ara whispered, "Thank you. You're my wife," Silas said simply. "No one shames you." The air between them warmed. Trust grew. Something deeper began to take root. Then came the bear. Then came the nightmares. Then came the confession of her past. Then came their first kiss. Then came the stranger, and the danger that followed them both. The summer heat came late to the mountains. Snow still clung to the high ridges, but the valleys warmed enough for green shoots to push through the earth. Ara worked harder than ever, and Silas watched her quietly as she cooked, cleaned, tended the small garden, and learned to do things she had never been taught before. Silas taught her how to set snares and how to read tracks. She learned how to keep the fire steady through the night and how to mend his torn shirts. Their days were full, and slowly, the cabin began to feel less like a shelter and more like a home. But the nights were when things changed. Silas still dreamed of the war. Some nights he woke drenched in sweat, breath shaking, eyes wild. Ara never woke him by touching him. Instead, she lit the lantern and sat nearby until his breathing slowed. One night, after a terrible dream, he finally spoke. "I held my brother while he died," Silas said, voice breaking. "He was 18. I promised I'd protect him. I failed." Ara's throat tightened. She wanted to comfort him, but she didn't know how. "You did not fail him," she said softly. "You stayed with him. That matters." Silas stared at her for a long moment, and something inside him eased. As trust grew between them, Ara found the courage to tell Silas her past, too, about Mr. Sterling, about the lie he told, about the city that chose a rich man's words over hers. Silas stood completely still as she spoke. Not a muscle moved. When she finished, and he said only one thing, "You never have to fear that man again." Ara cried for the first time in years. From that night forward, something gentle grew between them. They cooked together. They laughed sometimes. He taught her to shoot. She taught him to make bread that didn't taste like burnt bark. They worked side by side, two wounded people learning to live again. Then danger found them. Silas was checking his traps when he heard the scream. A sharp, high cry that tore straight through the forest. He dropped the trap and ran, crashing through branches, heart pounding. He found Ara backed against a fallen tree, breath shaking, eyes wide. A massive grizzly bear towered over her, growling deep in its chest. She held Silas's rifle, but her hands shook too badly to fire. Silas didn't think. He grabbed a branch, shouted loud, and ran at the bear. The animal whirled toward him, roaring. Its paw came down, missing his head by inches. Silas swung the branch, buying a heartbeat of time. "Ara!" he shouted. "Shoot!" Ara braced the rifle, fighting panic. She aimed. The bear lunged. She squeezed the trigger. The shot cracked through the trees. The bear staggered, roared again, then collapsed in a heap. Silas stared at Ara. Her whole body shook. She dropped the rifle and fell to her knees. Silas ran to her and pulled her into his chest. "You did it," he said, holding her tightly. "You saved us both." Ara buried her face against him. The fear inside her broke apart, replaced by something warm and steady. From that moment on, she knew Silas would risk his life for her, and he knew she would fight for him too. Weeks later, a rider appeared on their land, a clean-shaven man in a fine coat, his horse too well fed, his boots too polished for the wilderness. Ara froze the moment she saw him. "Mr. Sterling." He smiled at her with cold eyes. "Hello, Ara. Yeah, you didn't think I'd stop looking for you, did you?" Silas stepped in front of her like a wall. "Leave." Sterling laughed. "She's mine. She ran from her duties. The law will agree with me. She belongs back in Chicago, not hiding in the wild with some mountain animal." Silas's jaw clenched. "You need to ride away." Sterling leaned in. "Or what? You'll shoot me?" Silas didn't answer. His silence was enough. Sterling's smile faded. "She comes with me. Now." Ara clung to Silas's arm. Please, don't let him take me." Silas stepped forward until he stood inches from Sterling. "You are not touching my wife," Silas said. "You are not taking her. You will not speak her name again." Sterling reached for Ara's wrist. Silas grabbed him by the coat and shoved him back hard. Sterling fell into the dirt, stunned. "You have one chance," Silas growled. "Leave while you still can." Sterling scrambled onto his horse and rode off, shouting threats, swearing he would return with lawmen. Ara trembled badly. Silas pulled her into his arms. "You're safe," he whispered. "I'll never let him hurt you." Ara broke into tears. Silas held her until the shaking stopped. A week later, lawmen did arrive, but not for Ara. Sterling had attacked another woman in Chicago. Witnesses came forward. His lies collapsed. Ara was free. The relief broke her, and she cried into Silas's chest until she had no tears left. "You're free," Silas said again. "You're free for good." When she finally looked up at him, something changed between them. Something deep and certain. Silas touched her cheek gently. "I never expected to feel anything again. Not after the war. Not after losing everything. But you brought me back." Ara placed her hand over his heart. "You gave me a place where I could breathe again." They stood close, at the world quiet around them. Silas leaned in slowly, carefully, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. Their lips met, soft at first, then full of everything they had survived, everything they had become together. From that moment, there was no more distance in the bed, no more fear, no more cold walls around their hearts. They were husband and wife in truth, a mountain man who expected loneliness, a woman who expected nothing but sorrow, yet both saved by a love neither believed they deserved. And from that day on, anyone who rode past that cabin on Sawtooth Ridge could see the smoke rising strong from the chimney, carrying the warmth of two souls who had learned how to live again,